Thank you, Kimber. My name is Dave Dietrich, and I'm the General Manager of Faithful Transportation. And we focus on transporting special needs students. We often take a lot of homeless and foster care students as well. And what I would like to talk to you today, what I'm honored to talk to you today about, is positive behavior reinforcement, and really specifically how you as a transportation director can help train and equip your drivers to work with these high need students. So we'll start with point one is one specific tool that you can use as a transportation director, and then beyond that, 6 different tools and strategies that you can give your drivers. And I hope that you can walk away from this with at least 1 or 2 new ideas that you can implement in the coming school year. So the first slide is the first slide is very specifically, what can you do as a transportation director to help with these high need students? So the first step is identify the high need students ahead of time. That we work with 13 different school districts and intermediate units. That seems like something that comes naturally because those high need students, whether it's an emotional, physical, intellectual disability, or simply some type of behavior issue, these are the students that come across your desk, and so you're aware of them ahead of time. So letting the driver know ahead of time that there is a high need student. And then here's the second key that that is incredibly helpful, is providing actionable information to the drivers. So they don't need to know the autism spectrum. They don't know the difference between schizophrenia and bipolar. All of these things, frankly, are, in my opinion, as someone with a master's in social work who can diagnose, not that helpful. The driver does need to know what works for their student. So I believe that every student has something that driver can use to connect with, some motivator, something that student loves. So what I, as the contractor, really need from the transportation director is, man, what does this student love? Here are some real life examples. We've had multiple students, when I asked this question to the transportation directors, come back with Michael Jackson. So I bought multiple Michael Jackson CDs that we put on the vans. And so the goal of this is that when we drive up on that first day, after either that student moves into the district, maybe they got kicked off of another van, maybe there's some type of issue, we drive up, our driver says the student's name. Hi, Johnny. I'm glad you're here today. I heard you like Michael Jackson. Oh, you like Michael Jackson? We've got a Michael Jackson CD. Right there in the first 15 seconds, we have won 90% of the battles that we're going to have, just by doing a little bit of pre-work right there. The second real life example is we had a student that I was getting emails about, all capital letters. This is a very, very difficult student, all the different things that are scary about this student. And what I tried to find out with some pleading was what the student loves. And it sounds like the student loves toys that when you press a button, they play music. Now, I only found this out about 6 p.m. the night before we started transporting. So I ran home. Thankfully, I have 4 children, ages 7 and under, and we had some extra toys that when you press a button, they play music at home. So ran that back to the driver the next morning, and the very first day, the student did not want to get on the van, saw that toy that played music, jumped on the van and pressed that toy and heard that music for the whole ride to school. And for the months that we had this student, we never had to wake the student up. So that's something that you can do to set up both the driver and the student for success. On the next slide, we'll discuss training your drivers for success with students. The quote that I have is, if your only tool is a hammer, then every problem's a nail. A lot of our drivers come through all of our trainings with all the appropriate skills to drive the vehicle safely, but they only really have, they have a tool belt of tools to work with the students with only one or two tools in that. And so what I want to do for the rest of this section is to give you some very, very specific tools. But these tools will only work if the driver chooses to connect with the students every single day. So what does connecting with the students look like? It looks like knowing the student's first name and using it, and then also getting to know the students really in just the slightest way possible. What do they like? What do they dislike? Just knowing your kids is really the key to making this all work. The reason why connecting with the students is so important, and why it's more important now than ever, is because students do not respect authority as a general rule. You already know this, so I'm not giving you any new information, but the students do not respect authority. The students do not respect their teachers. They don't respect the principal. Their parents are talking bad about the principal. And so if the students and the parents are not respecting the teachers and the principals and the superintendents, do you really think they're going to respect the authority of a bus driver? The answer is no. Should they? Yes. Do they? No. But the big but there is that students will respect somebody who cares. And so your job, our job as drivers for these students, is choosing to care about the students and being able to communicate that in a way that the student understands. So these 6 tools will help address these behaviors while avoiding a confrontational power struggle. Because when you get into a power struggle with a student, most of the time you are going to lose, because the driver's not going to lose, because they're going to lose that relationship, or they're not going to get the appropriate backup from either the parents or the school that they feel that they need. And so we want to avoid that confrontational power struggle really until we, as much as humanly possible, we'd like to avoid this confrontational power struggle. So without further ado, the tools. Tool number 1 for your driver's tool belt is positive reinforcement. So this tool is simply catching the student doing something right and praising that behavior. So I believe that this tool will change the driver as much as it will change the students. So if you have a driver that is looking every day when the students get on the van, looking for what's wrong, they will find that. If every day the driver is looking for something right and praising that behavior, they will find that, and they'll find that these kids want attention from adults. And so when you praise that right behavior, you are going to get more of that. So I tell my drivers that are working with very, very difficult students, praise whatever you can, even if it's very small. Hey, thanks for getting in the van today, without yelling and buckling in, without a fight. Regular ed students, you may not need to handle that way, but for some of these high need students, then man, that kid knows that with the right thing to do, and more than that, because they already know the right thing to do, more than that, they know that someone is paying attention to them positively. So how do you praise that student? Figure out what the student identifies as reinforcing and give them that. This comes back to knowing your student. Is it a high five? Is it an attaboy? Is it words of affirmation? Is it radio choice? Stickers? I know stickers, in my opinion, work way longer than they should. You could probably give stickers to seniors in high school, or maybe even your colleagues, and they'll still be happy. The possibilities are endless to reinforce this behavior, but the point is, as a driver, are you looking to catch the student doing something right? That's tool number 1. Tool number 2 is consistency. Very, very important. Keep the van rules consistent, keep the van routes consistent, and this is the one that we'll spend time on, is keep your attitude consistent. It is my opinion that any type of personality can successfully manage student behavior. You can be quiet and nice and manage effectively. You can be loud and funny and manage effectively. You can be gruff and strict and manage effectively. We have all those drivers on staff. But what you can't be is all three. You can't be loud and fun on Monday morning, and then on Tuesday have the students sit down and make them stay quiet in the van. So what I tell my drivers is that pick who you're going to be and be that every day. It's not fair to the students to not know what mood their driver is going to be in when they get on the van. So keeping that consistent is incredibly important. Many of our students respond excessively negatively to a change in expectations. Sometimes changes in expectations are inevitable, but if you need to change them, so if you need to change the rules on the van, please communicate that at least 1 to 2 days in advance if possible. One of my favorite slightly irritating stories that I tell is a driver who got too lax with food and decided, hey, I'm sick of cleaning, where they're not supposed to have food anyways. So I'm sick of cleaning up after you guys. So effective today, there's no more food. So the next day, I get an angry call from mom, and and then because she was not able to give her kid breakfast on the van like she used to. So she's angry at me, then she calls the transportation director, then she calls the principal, and we have a whole big little mess on our hands because we deprived her dear child breakfast on our van. So we could have avoided that whole situation by just saying, hey, there's been a change, and that change is effective Monday rather than effective immediately. That gives parents, students, teachers time to adjust if there's any change in expectations. Tool number 3, clear, simple, concise directions. So this is a tool in place of the natural instinct to yell, stop it. This technique can help you regain control without confronting the behavior directly, because remember, we want to avoid that confrontational power struggle, because once you get there, 9 times out of 10 you're going to lose. So you have a student that is either escalating in their behavior, or you might be in the middle of an incident. Rather than yelling, stop it, you tell the student a simple directive of what to do rather than telling them to stop doing something. Examples of simple directions: ready hands. A lot of schools have a variation of ready hands or quiet hands that the students are already used to. Number 2, touch your seatbelt, touch your nose, fold your hands, rub your belly and pat your head, put your hands over your head. Well, maybe not that. Too many cop shows. But these are things that the student can do that can kind of change their, once they do that, they may change their behavior rather than just telling them to stop doing something else. Does this technique work all the time? No. Does it work some of the time? Absolutely. This should be a tool in your tool belt. Shouldn't be the only tool that you have, but it should be a tool in your tool belt. Tool number 4, distraction and redirection. Again, this is a situation where behaviors are beginning to escalate. Try to completely change the student's focus. So you can direct attention outside the vehicle. So once again, rather than yelling, stop, or come on now, come on, you can say, whoa, look at that truck. Or, oh, that is the weirdest looking dog I've ever seen. Or, wow, look at the picture on that billboard. Oh, how'd they get that up there? Changing their focus and their attention outside of the vehicle can help these kids. And sometimes when these kids get stuck in a rut, we want to change the train. If it can jump tracks, that's one step closer to having us de-escalate the situation rather than rather than facing it head on and escalating it. Another thing that you can do is ask questions. Do you like sports? Do you have pets? Do you play video games at home? Anything like that that can, once again, distract, redirect, and get these students thinking about something else and moving their brains in another direction. Again, is this something that's going to work 5 days a week? Absolutely not. But will it work some of the time? Absolutely, absolutely. Tool number 5 of 6, planned ignoring. So this is for those students who they may exhibit behaviors that are difficult, annoying, but don't actually cross the line into unsafe. So for example, they might be screaming at the top of their lungs. They might be cursing. They might be thrashing around in the back of the van, but they're not hitting anybody. They haven't yet unbuckled. They're not doing anything that is so unsafe that it would cause you to pull over. So this is what you should do in a situation like this. As the driver, address the behavior. Make sure that it's very clear what that student needs to be doing. So you can, and this should probably come after you've tried tools number 3 and 4, clear, concise directions and distraction and redirection. Hey, Joni, please stop yelling. It's time to quiet down. We're only 12 minutes away from home. It's really important that you quiet down. From that point on, when that student knows what to do, step 2 is ignore that behavior. So don't ignore the child, but ignore that behavior. Most kids do not have the willpower to make an extreme behavior last that long unless they're getting something that they want, like attention, or something like that. And so when you remove that attention from that behavior, and then secondarily try to help the other students on the van ignore that behavior as well, as that student comes back down, because they will at some point, it might feel like forever, but they will come back down, then go back to praising approximation of that positive behavior. Hey, Johnny, thanks so much for quieting down for the last 5 seconds. Don't sound sarcastic as I do right now. It's been really, really a joy to have you on this van. Praise the approximation of appropriate behavior. And then number 4, re-engage completely when the behavior stopped. So we want to communicate loudly and clearly to this kid when they are going to get attention by doing good things and when they're not going to get attention by doing things that are not appropriate. So what happens a lot of times with the drivers is that resentment builds up time and time again. So what you're actually doing is removing that positive piece that the student wants, and so you're going to get more and more escalation as that student is not even getting the positive attention that they used to get. So that is planned ignoring. It's a great tool to have in your tool belt. And this is the last tool that we'll share today. Disengage and re-engage. So I covered it briefly in tool number 5. And so after the incident occurs, so this may be a situation where you had to pull over because the situation got that escalated. Maybe there was a major incident in the morning and you're coming back in the afternoon. But it's incredibly important that after you disengage, you re-engage with that child. So let's say in this scenario number 1, you are had to pull over, let's say, for a student who, who's thrashing around and I'm finally unbuckled. It's important, even in a situation like that, allow the child a little bit of space. I know we don't have much room in transportation to allow them space to regain composure. I completely understand that. As much as possible, give them the space that they have, and sometimes even the emotional space to regain composure. Getting up in a student's face is not going to help de-escalate the situation. And just a reminder that these students do have a lot of emotions. They are children. They are teenagers who by definition have a lot of emotions. They are coming from backgrounds that could be more difficult than the average background. School could be a really hard place for them. They could have a disability that makes them unable to process their emotions appropriately. Give them a little bit of space. Once they come back down, treat them as if nothing happened. So they need to know that they are cared for, even if they have an incident. So go back to treat them as if nothing happened. Treating them as if nothing happened does not mean there's no consequences for what they did. We still need to write them up. We still need to instill discipline, but treating them as if nothing happened gives them a chance to reconnect again. So after the incident, resume normality, and then remind the drivers not to take it personally. Like I just said, these students have complex, sometimes very hard lives, and 98 times out of 100, they are actually not upset with the driver. They're upset with something else and maybe taking it out on the driver. So reminding the drivers not to take some of these behaviors personally is of paramount importance. And I'll end with this because this actually happens frequently here at Faithful Transportation, and it's one of the most gratifying experiences for me, is when a student after an incident the next day comes back and apologizes to the van driver. To me, that's wonderful, because that means that driver has chosen to connect with that student, and that student values the relationship so much that they would feel safe enough and they care enough to apologize the next day to the van driver. When that happens, I know that it's not going to be incident free for the rest of the year, but I do know that they'll make it through because they've established that connection. And once again, students will respect and respond to people that they feel that care for them. So I hope that you were able to I threw a lot of suggestions and a lot of tools at you, and I hope that you're able to take at least one or two of these back and make an improvement to your school year. Thank you.